Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Value Prop Podcast. We are interviewing today Allison DeFord of Felt Marketing. And Allison has a unique and very human approach to strategic marketing, especially from manufacturers. So whether you're an OEM, contract manufacturer, you're working in the space, you'll want to listen to this episode. Some real practical, pithy insights on how you can absolutely activate some more attraction for your business in your market with the customers you want to do business with. So listen closely as Allison joins our show. Well, welcome, Allison, to the podcast. Really appreciate you making the time to be with us.
I'm excited to be here, Jose. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, Allison, I think one thing that's always helpful for our audience is if you would just take a moment to tell us exactly what you do and who you do it for. And I'm sure that's a big range of things, but maybe the main things.
Well, I'll tell you, most manufacturers waste time and money on marketing that doesn't grow sales. And at Felt, we help you become not just seen and heard through marketing, but felt, connecting on a more emotional level with your ideal fit customers. Why do you want to do this? To make sales easier.
Now, that's interesting because I know most of the work, or I think just about all the work that you focus on is working with manufacturers, right?
Correct.
So when you think about things like feelings and
Mhm.
manufacturing, they don't often go in the same conversation necessarily, right? Uh,
No.
so how I'm just curious how when you start working with a client, let's say, how do you get them to think they might be saying, I just need new collateral, I need a new website, I need that. And you're saying, well, there's a bigger conversation that we need to have here about how, and so on, get to the heart of the matter. I'm not trying to do what you do, but just to capture the thought. Do you ever have a challenge getting somebody to see the need and the wisdom of approaching it that way?
Yes. The majority of our clients are, we determined about 10 years ago or so, they're very left brain, analytical, and myself and my team, of course, are very right brain with that nice balance of left brain that you need to have. And we figured out, all right, we've been busy speaking our language. We need to speak their language.
Mm.
What would make this easier for them to connect head and heart and not have it feel fluffy or woo woo? And believe it or not, we figured out that the thing that happens between people, whether you're dating or it's you and a customer, what is that magical thing that happens when there's trust and you like each other and it's mutually beneficial? And we decided it was chemistry. And so then that kind of, the little bell went off, and we thought chemistry, that's science. Science is very rational, left brain, factual. Then we
Okay.
were onto something. So we developed the periodic table of customer touch points where we take a brand and we lay you over these 8 categories and we say, okay, here are all the places where you are showing up, engaging with your customers. How many of these are active? How many of those active are optimized, working well for you? And how many are dormant? You're not doing anything. And just to watch their face says it all. They get to see, they decide. It's not us telling, it's them recognizing. And so that's been one of the biggest breakthroughs I feel like we've had in 10 years to communicate this. The second thing that really resonates with people is when we talk about how people make decisions 90% of the time, it isn't rationally. It's based on emotion, right? So, why are we working so hard all these years marketing to people, trying to speak to their left side of their brain, the rational side, when they're only making decisions over there 10% of the time? So, whenever I describe that, I see people do this and they lean in, they're like, okay, this makes sense.
Well, I
So,
could definitely see, though, Allison, what somebody would say. no, wait a second, when I bought that new punch press or that new whatever, auger filler, that was a very analytical purchase I had to make. And my team got together, we figured out the best, the ROI on it, or, software, those kinds of purchases, which the manufacturer themselves are actually selling. If they're an OEM, they make a product. If they're a contract manufacturer, they're selling their services. So you started off with like, we want to make sure that ADC is not woo-woo, right? I love that. And then the periodic table, I think, is brilliant. The idea of, these are areas that they kind of can process and say, yeah, that's a green light, a yellow light, a red light, so to speak.
Correct.
Right. But then you go to this next, it's like, okay, I'm with you, but now you're telling me that 90% of the decisions people make, which means 90% of the decisions I make, are actually emotional more than rational. And how do you help somebody see that that's actually a very true truth? I happen to agree with you, Allison, on that point. I think that's a big part. So I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just curious how somebody pushing back, thinking, no, everything, because I agree. A lot of people in B2B sell features, benefits, details, facts. That's what sells. How do you bridge that gap from that to it? Yes, that's maybe important, but here's something else you have to connect with.
Science and research. And I
Okay.
and I will show them the science and the research that backs that up. And what science tells us is, in fact, when you decided to make that purchase of whatever that, that Mazak machine or whatever that big piece of equipment or whatever, ultimately it was an emotional decision to say yes. You supported it with the rational side of the brain that says, well, this is a good idea because it checks off all these boxes. And so it's not me making this up and saying, believe me when I tell you.
Right.
It's we took this from science, from facts, and we thought, well, this backs up our theory of connecting head and heart. And the second the second big mistake that I see manufacturers making is that many of them are suffering from something I call the wee wee syndrome.
Hmm.
So, like you said, we're busy talking about our features and our benefits and our palettes of fill in the blank, whatever, part we're making, and here's a picture of our 16 million square feet of, wonderland. And what we're telling people is that is not motivating. And they look at you and say, really? Why not? Isn't that impressive? Like, it's important, but people don't care about you, they care about them. So, and I know you're a big fan of this as well, and that's the whole point of this podcast too, is that unique value that you bring to the table. And what is that really? Well, it's a promise. And so the thing that I really enjoy helping manufacturers do is flip the script and understand or develop, because most of them are missing this, a really strong, unique value proposition, that promise that they lead with on their website. And it's very challenging because most of the time they think it's about them. And what we have to steer them towards is it's about your customer. What's in it for them? Why should they buy this thing? And why should they buy it from you? So lead with that and flip the script and stop looking at your own navel because only you think it's really exciting.
And maybe not so much even that, right?
Right?
Well, it's interesting, right? So you talked about things that are important, and I think some of those details are historically important, right? At some point, the decision or the discussion will turn to some technical aspects of capabilities, timing, when can you deliver it, whatever those things are. But that's not the entry point of interest that creates engagement, if I'm understanding this correctly. So in other words, that doesn't make the phone ring. That just means you're one of many providers that could do somewhat the same things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I always talk about is in most categories. Well, let's put it this way, Apple came out with the iPhone, and within 18 months, Google had launched Android. If Apple can't keep a competitive advantage of total uniqueness in a market for more than 18 months with billions and billions of dollars and the best scientists in the world, how is a $20 million manufacturer going to try to sustain that sole mountaintop experience if they're not doing something else, right? Which is kind of what we're talking about here. So as we bridge the gap in terms of moving from wee syndrome
Mm-hmm.
to what's in it for the, it's the classic, what's in it for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is most important in terms of a company you work with, in terms of understanding their customers, like just understanding in my experience, a lot of times in that category, in the industrial categories, owners and leadership teams, when I ask a lot of probing questions, I say, wow, they really don't know they know their industry, they know how to make their widget,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't really know what's driving their customers or their customers' business, or what's affecting their customers' business, that kind of thing.
Right.
So how do you help them see that?
Great question. Um, we help them see that by helping them develop customer personas. This isn't anything new. Everybody's talking about customer personas. And it's interesting because I was just working with a client in Utah earlier this week. And we spent 2 full days running through something that we um, have called a breakthrough boot camp. And part of that experience is figuring out, okay, let's give a name and a face and a title to 3 of your main personas, the people that are the decision maker that actually buy from you. He said, okay. And so in a nutshell, we had corporate buyer, we had small company buyer. So those are your procurement people, obviously.
Mm.
Then we had specifier, which is like, he calls them the weird scientist, engineer, weird in a good way kind of person.
Right.
So we have these 3 people. We spent hours going through, well, how do these people feel? What
Mm.
are they talking about? What do they care about? And by the time we were finished, he sat back and he said, I've been in manufacturing my entire life. And he's 60. He said, I've also been engaged in many marketing activities, kind of like this. He said, I've never, ever spent this much time on the customer and what they really care about. And he said, this is eye opening. And I said, right, if you understand them and how they tick, you'll know better how to communicate with them, what kind of things to talk about that they care about. It isn't your widgets, right? It's, these people care about maybe creating a legacy, let's say. Are they an employee? Yes. Well, if they're an employee, they're answering to these people up here, and they're answering to salespeople, and they're answering. And so we kind of go through and make these little, almost like a mind map of, so when I have this mindset, what is it I really care about? And so we figure out what are the main things, what are their goals, what are their frustrations, and what are their motivations. And then we take that and we create a content strategy so that there is a method to this madness. You're not just marketing at people and interrupting them, you're marketing for them and on behalf of them, because you're trying to help them have a better life, work faster, work smarter, not harder, whatever that looks like for them. And to watch his face, and because I always ask, what is this like for you right now? Let's do a check-in, one word check-in. How are you feeling? And he said, enlightened. He said, this is really,
Wow,
really
that's
good.
a powerful thing. And what's really fascinating about that, Allison, and it's actually very exciting to me, is you're able to do this boot camp, right? So there is a, like, what I call big marketing, right? So your big marketing firms working with like the John Deere's of the world or something.
Right.
That to attack something like that process of personas and so on, say, well, we got to do, like, we have to do focus groups, and we have to do, we have to do all kinds of like survey instruments, and it's a 6-month voice of customer type of thing, right? So, and by the way, those are all valid things if you got that kind of
Yes,
budget. Like,
those are wonderful.
those are wonderful things if you can afford it. But what I love about that exact example you gave is you were able to have this session. And what you did is you drew out of this person what they already knew, but they hadn't given language to it, didn't know how to organize it. Like it's all just noise. It's a lot of head, the stuff is there, but you were able through your process pull out from them insights. So yeah, they were enlightened, and your process, without it, they wouldn't have gotten there. But what's exciting about it is they actually had, and many people listening to this podcast, I would just say you have this knowledge, but it helps to have somebody help draw it out of you. Otherwise, it's just buried treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting to hear how you did that.
Well, thank you. It's a lot of fun. It's we've been doing this, developed this over the last decade, and that was 20 years prior. I don't want to say doing it wrong. I feel like we were doing it the hard way. And so that's what I love about this process. And the cool thing that comes out of the work is, so I ask these questions. So let's think about what does this person care about? What's their day look like? And so my client they'll give an answer. And I looked at him and I said, uh-huh, and keep going. And they laughed and they said, okay. And I said, we got to peel back the layers of the onion. Your first couple answers are always, I call those surface answers. Sure. And when you finally get deeper, we also do an exercise with them where when we talk about what's different and special about you that's not like everyone else. And so they answer, of course, quality, solutions,
reputation,
our people, our customer service, all the things. And I say, okay, now at the end of each one of those, could you honestly say, like everyone else? And you see just the look on their face, it's like, oh yeah. And so then we get to there's an old story about Schlitz and steam cleaning their vats. And my old creative partner brought this to my attention, and I thought, where's she going with this? But it's really brilliant. She said back in the day, they decided to start talking about the fact that they steam cleaned their vats, how clean and pure whatever their beer was. And apparently everybody steam cleaned their vats, but nobody talked about it. So that's what I was talking with this particular client about. He's a contract manufacturer. And I said, what's something you do that nobody else does? And it may be something so simple. And so we dug and we figured it out. And he just sat back and shook his head and he said, this is exciting. And I said, I know, because now you, as a brand, you have something to talk about that people will care about that nobody else has thought of or talked about, even though they're doing it too. But you're bringing it to the forefront. So,
well, and you're saying, what's interesting. Let's go back to the Schlitz example, right? So let's say, all things being equal, everybody has to steam clean their thing. Mm-hmm. But by them calling attention to it, I think there's a psychological connection that says, well, maybe everybody steam cleans their vats, but they must really do it more carefully. They must do it with greater care because they're making it the centerpiece of their whole campaign. It says it's a priority, right?
Correct.
So, and it's interesting because you look at, for example, if they're flying where I'm going, I'm on Southwest. I love Southwest, right? So I, been doing that for, I guess, 15 years now. And, it's a 737. A lot of airlines have 737s. It has seats. They have seat belts. And there's some sort of, flight attendant there. And there's two pilots in the front, which I hope they'll always be the case. I think there's some airlines in Europe that will fly with one pilot, which I think is insane. But hey, whatever. And the point is, there's a lot of things they do the same as everybody else. But what they have some edges on is truly they are committed to be a friendlier environment. Yep. Their queuing system is simpler. Anybody could do that, could figure out a way. At the end of the day, you get your seat and you sit down where you're supposed to sit. And so I love that example that you gave, Allison, because it really helps us see, I think for our listeners, just saying, there's probably something you're doing now that you don't think anything of it, but if you told your customers about it, they would actually maybe go lean in and say, wow, that's interesting. I'm glad you're doing that.
Yep.
So now, as you get into this customer exploration with your clients, right? When you're working with them, helping them see as part of your boot camp, trying to get into customer behavior and things like that. How often do you find you need to do some third party research? We should be doing some interviews. We should be doing some at least qualitative phone conversation. Is that typically necessary, or do you think if you have the right people in the room, you can kind of shortcut that?
I think it's preferable always. It's the difference between assuming and knowing for
Mhm.
certain. And so I'm a fan. If you don't have the money or the budget for a voice of customer survey, then we encourage, can you at least provide us with a short list of customers and allow us, like, make an introduction and allow us to have just a brief conversation with them on your behalf, and explain to them why is that we're trying to make the experience even better for them. And if we can understand them, then that's incredibly helpful. And so I feel that that's when we get the most golden nuggets, is when we can actually extrapolate that from their customers. If that is not possible, there have been many instances where I find the salespeople, if I can get with them, which I think sales and marketing need to stop siloing, and right, they need to come
Sure.
together and support each other. But I think the salespeople, all the salespeople that I've ever met that are worth their weight in gold, which most of them are, they've got all this knowledge and you just have to pull it out of them. And you have to also constantly flip it to the customer's point of view. Like, I have to repeat that over and over and over again during our time together. And they'll say, well, I think, or I feel. And I say, no, 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 from the customer's point of view. And if you can't answer the question, let's go ask them, because then we'll know.
Because then we'll know. I love it. It's like, it's right. We're not getting the nuclear launch codes. I mean, it's something they'll tell you. If what are we doing well? What would you like us to do better? Sometimes as simple as that. And also, they'll tell you because they want you to know. They'd rather have suppliers that actually know what they need and want, so they can supply it.
Yeah.
Um, so Allison, one last kind of personal question here in the context of what you do. Um, because I know you're excited about manufacturing. So what excites you about manufacturing? I mean, there's a lot of, with your skill, with your background, your agency, you could have chosen a lot of different industries to focus on, but you love manufacturing. So what is it about manufacturing that you love the most?
Well, there are two things. One is I love the stories. I love the story of granddad who bootstrapped, two nickels to rub together. He and grandma put a second on their home, and they started this company because he or she saw a need for this product that didn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they created it, and it's now morphed into this amazing company and provided jobs and education, inspiration, sending kids to college. Like, it's done that for families, which has then impacted the community. And then ultimately, this is the backbone of our country. The second thing that I love about manufacturing is that they make something from nothing. And typically, that something goes into this larger item, like a rocket or an airplane, or, fill in the blank, that helps us all live better. So whether it's our smartphone, whether it's, the house we live in, the car we drive, that's all manufacturing. And so I feel really excited about that. Um, and it's funny, if I had to put a sound to that answer, and this is going to sound strange, but bear with me. I walked into my client's building on Monday, and that hum. And he
Yeah,
looked at me and he goes, "Don't you just love that sound?" And I said,
yeah,
it just felt like energy. It's so cool.
that is cool. I love walking manufacturing floors for that and seeing just people, like you said, taking a raw piece of metal and also it comes out and it's an important part of something and it's tangible. And I'm in the services business my whole career, so like for some reason, I just resonated with that. So I really like your description of that, Allison, and that really connected with me.
And
Well,
really quick,
yeah,
can I interject something really
of
quick?
course.
The other thing that I think is incredibly meaningful and important to your customers and to your employees, and this is a line from the movie The Help, when at the end Viola Davis said, "Nobody ever asked me what it's like to be me." And I find the same thing with customers. When you call them up and you do that interview, it's not just, what do you like about us? What could we do better for you? I say, what's it like to be you?
Mm.
And you hear this absolute silence. And then they say, wow. And then it's like, same thing with employees, right? When I meet your Tom, who's 65 and he's out in the back of your warehouse and he's been there forever. And he looks at me like, oh, there's this marketing person that's going to work with us. What does that mean? And I walk up and I go, what is it like to be you? Because this is pretty spectacular to be here and do what you do. And just to watch him stand up
Oh,
and
yeah.
feel proud. So I just had to share that because
No, that's great.
something that happened this week.
No, and I love putting it's human. It's putting the human part in that. So Allison, if somebody listening to this said, "Hey, Jay, what Allison's saying is resonating with me. I'd like to learn more about her agency, what they do," where should they find more information? How would they get in touch with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn and just search Allison DeFord, I will pop up. I'm very active there. You can DM me. You can also email me, allison@feltmarketing.com.
That's easy. I love it. Allison, thank you. This has been a real joy to talk to a kindred spirit. Really appreciate it.
Yes, me as well. And thank you for everything that you're doing in this world. I truly appreciate your creativity and your intuitive. I don't think intuition. I think that it's bringing a lot to this industry and to companies. So I say thank you as well.
Oh, well, you're very welcome, and thank you. And have a great week.
Thanks. You too.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. If you like this episode and if you like the series, make sure you subscribe below. And also, if you liked it, please do review it. When people are looking for something exciting to listen to, especially the kind of content we're bringing, which is practical insights for B2B companies, this is a place and a free resource that they can take advantage of. Let them know about it with your review. So subscribe, review, enjoy. Thanks again.